Does jazz guitar feel like a competition about who knows the most scales? You only need 2 dominant scales for 95% of jazz, and once I figured this out, I could finally stop just practicing scales and actually focus on getting better. So in this video, I'm gonna show you the 2 scales that I've used to help hundreds of my students level up their jazz playing, and how you can use them to play real jazz solos without getting stuck in endless scale exercises. Besides playing better solos, a great bonus with this approach is that it also helps you instantly pick the right scale in the chord progression without needing a degree in music theory. I'm gonna show you that later in the video. When Joe DiOrio asked Wes Montgomery what scale he played on a 2-5-1, Wes gave him this almost Yoda-like answer, but it really is nailing the point.
Wes, when you think of D minor G7C, or when you see it, what do you think? He said, man, it's a sound. Man, it's a sound.
And that is also how you want to split your scale choices. 2 basic sounds, major and minor. You probably know that I'm not a huge fan of modes, and this is a perfect example. Complicated names and endless interval recipes just get in the way. It's a lot easier to just ask, does it sound major or does it sound minor? You already know these 2 sounds, and that covers 95% of all the dominant chords. They're either in a major or a minor context. Let's start with major. You know what's great? Soloing over a dominant chord is not as mysterious as you might think. A dominant chord from major is a chord that you already know in a scale that you also already know. And as I'll explain in a bit, this is the dominant sound that you will come across almost all the time. Take C major as an example. You've got these diatonic chords. The dominant chord, G7, is just the 5th chord in the scale, and you rely on the major scale for all sorts of chords, so it makes sense to learn its diatonic arpeggios. They're what help you truly connect with each chord that you play, and as you will see, incredibly useful for a lot of solo material. Here's a quick exercise to show you what I mean. Now, the main goal is to sound great over G7, and you don't want to just run up and down the scale like a robot. There are actually 4 arpeggios that you can use, and I'm going to show you all of them, plus some classic jazz licks from famous artists along the way. Let's start with the obvious one, the G7 arpeggio. It's maybe a bit weird, but the G7 arpeggio isn't even the most popular arpeggio choice in bebop for a G7 chord. Some of the other arpeggios are actually used much more often. Now, to make your lines really flow, you want to mix the arpeggio with scale notes and even some chromatic notes, like this. So you have the leading note to the 3rd B in the middle of the arpeggio, and then the walk up to the resolution to the E, where we transition to the C major 7. And this is anticipated, so the E is on the 4 and then I'm adding just a short tail into the C major 7 bar, because stuff like that is really what makes it sound like bebop. Next up, move up to the 3rd of G7, which is a B, and here you have a B half diminished arpeggio. The arpeggio from the 3rd of a dominant is used a lot. Here's a great George Benson line that I transposed from F. He plays it in his solo over Billy's Bounce, and this really demonstrates his bebop roots as well, because this could easily have been a Charlie Parker lick. Here you have the D minor 7 line, which is really just a 2nd inversion D minor triad with a lot of chromatic leading notes, and some simple enclosures, but that's for another video. Now, the B half diminished comes in right on the G7 and transitions into a Charlie Parker lick. And this Charlie Parker lick is something that Barry Harris also talked a lot about. It's definitely worth checking out. Keep going up in the arpeggio and you land on the 5th D, and this gives you a D minor 7 arpeggio. Using the arpeggio of the 2 chord over the 5 is common both with Wes Montgomery and Charlie Parker. Here's a lick Charlie Parker used very often. I transposed this again from F, and it starts with the D minor 7, so the arpeggio of the 2 chord, and then goes into this great chromatic phrase that sort of shifts across the meter with groups of 3 notes. Wes often used the arpeggio from the 5th as a way to get to the 3rd of the dominant chord, but he also used this as a type of short 1-bar 2-5 phrase. Check out how this just beautifully frames the 3rd of the G7 on B3. The final arpeggio is from the 7th of the chord, and in this case, that is of course an F major 7. Now this is what Barry talks about when he talks about the arpeggio from the 7th. And check out the great lines that you can create with this. The dominant and major is everywhere in jazz. These arpeggios and licks are your building blocks for major key dominance, 5 of 5 in major, backdoor dominance, 5 of 4, jazz blues, and many more. And there is an easy rule for picking which one to use. But first, let's see how this works in minor. You've already heard how the dominant chord works in the major sound. Now the other flavor is of course the dominant chord in the minor sound. To make this less abstract, try imagining or hearing a 5 chord in a minor song that you already know, like the ending of the A parts in Softly as in a Morning Sunrise. The 5 chord in minor usually comes from the harmonic minor scale. Now if we take A minor as a key, then the dominant is E7 and the scale is A harmonic minor. Just like the major sound, it is incredibly useful to know the diatonic chords and arpeggios from the harmonic minor scale. To really get the flavor of this chord, let's check out the extensions. Now if you look at the E7 and the extensions available, you get an E7 with a flat 9 and a flat 13. Try playing the chord with these notes just to hear the tense dramatic sound that you'll use in your solos. And don't forget that playing the chords of a chord progression that you want to solo over always helps you play stronger lines. There are fewer common arpeggios for the minor sound, but the first to explore is the E7 arpeggio, and I'll also show you a secret non-diatonic one in a second. Another great option is to move up a third to G sharp diminished, which of course also adds that F, giving you a flat 9 on the dominant. Now this sounds awesome in an E7 phrase, like this. I'll get to that last secret arpeggio in a bit, but first here's another cool trick. Use the diminished arpeggio as a pivot arpeggio. Now this means that you take the first note of the arpeggio, G sharp, and then move that up an octave, adding a large melodic interval skip. And now you can play something like this, which of course sounds a lot more catchy. Now for that last arpeggio. Now this one isn't strictly diatonic, so it's not just a stack of thirds from the harmonic minor scale, but it absolutely nails the E7 flat 9 flat 13 sound. Here's how it works. What do you need for the sound of an E7 with a flat 9 and a flat 13? Now you need the E7, which you can get just with the guide tones, so the 3rd G sharp and the 7th D. Then you also need the flat 9, that's F, plus the flat 13, that's C. Now if you put those together, and then from D, then you have D, F, G sharp, and C. And that's actually the same set of pitches as D minor 7 flat 5. And this arpeggio is perfect for outlining the dominant chord in a minor key. Now that you know how to create lines for both of these dominant sounds, here's how to decide which one to use. Knowing when to use the major or minor dominant sound is actually pretty simple. Stick with the major sound if the dominant chord resolves to a major chord or doesn't resolve at all, meaning it doesn't move to a chord a fifth below, like G7 to C major 7 or E7 to A minor. Now most of the common progressions that you've seen fall in this category, as you can see in the list. The rule for the minor sound is just as straightforward. Use it when dominants resolve to a minor chord, like 5-1 in minor, or maybe a secondary dominant going to a 2 chord. So in C major that would be A7 to D minor 7, which means that you use D harmonic minor on A7. At the start, keep things simple. There are more sounds and scales to explore, but your best bet is to build a solid foundation that you can actually use in your music. You can always add more flavors as you go. Ask any pro jazz guitarist. The secret to leveling up is practicing the stuff that really makes a difference. Practical, focused practice is what gets results. Now, if you want to hear specific advice from legends like Wes Montgomery, check out this video. I'm going to show you how to use their practice strategies so that you can learn faster and skip all the useless exercises. Check it out. Learn jazz, make music.